Retina I, type 126. Now my writing instructions said that the front had been pushed in and didn't latch. It's got no latch. The latch mechanism has gone completely. So that's certainly going to need replacement. How did that come to disappear? Well, that's very difficult to say. The rivet that holds it in the body up here is present and correct. I can't tell whether it's loose, of course, at this stage. The screw and stud at the base there, the button that you press, that's missing. That would screw into the arm. And the arm has gone completely. Possibly the button became unscrewed. There was nothing then holding the arm in position. Quite likely if you just pulled on the door, the arm might swing forward and it would be lost pretty much immediately. So it's no beauty queen, this camera. I want to make it into a good working example. The Zeiss bumps, they're going to have to stay, and the reason they're going to have to stay is that the leather on this, as with the earlier cameras, the 117, 118 and 119, which is basically the same as this, all had the leather wrapped around the edge of the doors. Later cameras just had leather in an inset panel. Because it wraps around the edges of the doors, it's exceptionally thin leather. It's really, really thin, sort of bookbinder thin or worse. And getting it off in one piece to deal with things like Zeiss bumps is very difficult indeed. And it's just not worth the risk. You're just going to cause more damage than anything else. But apart from that, I think we can make a going camera out of this. The lens has certainly sort of a cloudy look about it. I think that might be in for cataract surgery soon. But there we go, we'll work on it. That shoe, yeah, is it original? I don't know. I don't think I've got a type 126 with a shoe on it to find out. I might have. I'll see if I can find one to compare it to. But the camera needs to come apart. First task here is to remove that advance knob. That's always entertaining. Got a spanner here to engage the flats on the top of the shaft. You can see that that's a little bit reluctant to rotate. That's good. So with that being held firmly, I've only got to unscrew the knob, which is left-hand thread. Of course, it's not going anywhere. Right, more work. The solution. Here I've got a hose clamp. I've got a ring of leather inside it so that it doesn't damage the knob. Put that over the knob. Do that up tightly, and I'm trying to make sure that the hose clamp is off the surface of the top plate, because otherwise it can scratch it, and I'd rather avoid that. Always watch out for this loose tail on the hose clamp, because it can be a problem. Right, is my spanner in place? It is. Let's see if this will turn clockwise. There we go, it did. Take that off. Take that off immediately so you're not rotating it. You don't want any of this clamp scratching the top of the camera. So that knob's off. That's very often the hardest part of the repair, trying to get that off without anything going seriously wrong. And our top cover. we have a single screw here. That lifts off. Under here we have the film advance mechanism such as it is. Right, where to start? I'll take the frame counter off. That's a chrome screw, of course it shows at the top of the camera, so you've got to be careful not to scar that, it'll be obvious. So this stack of parts, I'll zoom you in a bit. I'll get these parts off. The screw, the counter disc, this strange star-shaped spring washer, the top part of the mechanism that controls how much film travels through the camera. This flattish star-shaped washer, and then this gear with a little pin on it. Now those are all the components underneath that frame counter dial, and these components here control how much film is allowed to run through the camera, because that wheel is turned by the sprocket shaft here. Come on camera, keep up. Yeah, as the sprocket shaft turns here, it rotates a gear here, which turns this, which drives this, and that little notch in there engages with levers controlling levers here, and those levers in turn, push that to one side, engage with the ratchet wheels here. So I've taken this disc off the top of the film advance, that's the one with the piece sticking out, it's been plunged. Now, get these gears off. They're usually pressed on, they're often a bit reluctant to come off, and getting underneath them to lift them is a problem. So I'm using it. Oh, that came off easily, that's easy, that was fine. I just slid a scalpel blade under there. There's one. Watch the direction of the teeth on here, those ratchet teeth, so that you put them back in the correct place. And we've got a plain washer under there, another ratchet tooth wheel, and this one has the teeth going in the opposite direction. Here again I'm just sliding a scalpel blade under there to lift this. Two reasons. One, because it's nice and thin and I can get it underneath the gear, and second, because it's got a nice broad surface, so I'm pushing against the washer and the support underneath it gently. I don't want to distort that flat washer any more than I need to. That's coming off now. There's some tweezers. There we go. And underneath that was one more plain washer, which we may or may not get out easily. Here we go. That brings us to our control levers. This is the advanced rewind. No, it's not. What's that? Yes, it is. That's the advanced rewind lever. Sorry for being confused. It's got a shoulder screw that holds that in position, and that tightens up on it a bit. There's a bit of friction to it. This of course is very filthy. There's nothing on, there's no spring or anything on it. Here. Well, I'll take this screw out here. That moves the frame counter. That's got a shoulder screw, which I'll get out. And the arm couples here to a spring coming out from underneath the viewfinder here. So we've uncoupled that from the spring. At the front here, one large screw head. This lever, which resets your film advance, as you push it across to free the film advance to wind on. We've got two levers here that control the film advance mechanism. A spring there that returns them. There's a washer in between the two levers. This is the lower lever, this one here. The spring here acts against both of those levers. They have studs underneath them to pull them into engagement. A single screw holds this piece in place. This slides across to reset the counter, reset the film advance. Our film advance shaft bushing is held in with 3 screws. We can get that to come out. Yeah, it's coming out. Okay. So the advance shaft here simply goes through that bush. There's no spring, nothing else in there. At the back of the camera, zoom you out of it. The back of the camera, there's our film take-up spool. It's a metal take-up spool. I'm removing that. I'm going to see if I can remove the rewind knob now and strip this plate off the top here, just so I can do a good job of cleaning that whole top plate. Now the rewind knob may or may not come loose without a fight. Normally you just need to put something through the fork and rotate the rewind knob anti-clockwise. Yeah, it's coming loose. Now if it doesn't come loose, give up, just don't fight it. You don't need to get that off. It's just easier to clean if you do. There's always a danger that you'll distort this quite considerably at the bottom here, just from the torque of putting a tool through it and fighting with the knob. If this gets pushed out of shape, you'll find that it doesn't want to pull up into the bush, and so it's difficult to get it out of the film cassette. So as I say, if it doesn't want to come, don't fight it. Two screws here hold that bush in place for the rewind. And we have 2 screws holding the accessory shoe in place. I don't have a type 126 on hand, so I'm willing to give that the benefit of the doubt and say that that's a normal original part. Certainly it's dirty enough underneath that shoe that it could have been there for ever and a day. The viewfinder, 2 small screws, one either side. Oh, that little washer can come off there. That was underneath those 2 front levers. Getting at this particular screw is much easier when there's no rewind knob in place. So if you need to clean the finder, keep that in mind. Here's our finder assembly. We've got the front lens, the rear lens, and they're held in place with like a black spring arrangement. At the top of the camera here, this is all held down in position with 2 screws. This is painted black because it forms the base of the viewfinder and it stops you getting any undue reflection in the finder. That second screw was a bit tight. That can come off. There's the plate that goes under it, and the cutout is to clear this spring, which was for the film winder parts. Anything else here I want to deal with? This is fairly optional. There are 2 tiny screws here and here, and I'm going to loosen those screws up, remove them, and slide this whole shaft out. Clean it, because I want the shell empty, because I've got to try and get that front catch back in place for the front door, which means I've got to find parts, of course. These screws will be small, very easily lost. That shaft going to come up. One screw's loosen up. This one's still catching. There we go, just about there. That's it. So I'll put those 2 components down with this screw. Now there was a washer there. That washer went between the body and this component, the sprocket wheel, which I've just dropped somewhere. Can't have gone far. Right. Let the disassembly continue. At the base of the camera, I want this off. This is our depth of field scale. 2 chrome screws. And there's 4 pieces here, because this piece is stuck to the leather. So 4 pieces there make up that arrangement. Take those off. And let's see. I want this piece of leather off the base of the camera. So I'm using my scalpel. And if the camera is got some degree of corrosion to it, you may well find the leather strips off very easily. If it hasn't, it may be very well stuck. It's quite common for the leather to rip across here. Sometimes it's broken before you can start to move it, as the leather has shrunk over time against that knob. judging how best to get the leather off is just something that comes with practice, really. In this case, I could tell from the feel of it that the leather was comparatively robust and it would peel up well like this. It was easy to get the glue to give up the ghost and come free. And always be cautious around thin areas. Here you can see corrosion. That white stuff there, that's corrosion of the aluminium camera body. That is loosened up underneath the adhesive, so the adhesive has stayed stuck to the leather completely, but the corrosion has just lifted it completely from the body. The tripod socket screws are frequently loose. I'm not sure what these will be like. That was certainly tight enough. That was okay. There's the third of them. The tripod socket in this case has got "Made in Germany" engraved in the base of it, or embossed in the base of it. I want to take the front door off here now. See if this little screw here holding the spring in place will come loose. Sometimes they do, sometimes they do not want to. If they don't, leave them alone. I just take it off so that there's less likelihood of me damaging the screw. Now, I went to loosen the screw on the front door, and as soon as I put my screwdriver on it, it pushed right through, and it pushed right through because the screw snapped off. The screw is actually snapped off from the top of the door. See if I can unscrew the one at the bottom. I think that's corroded in. Most likely the other one was rusted in too, and that's possibly why it's broken. I don't need that. If I partly can collapse the front of the camera, I can actually should be able to wiggle that bottom screw out like that. Now there's a spring on the door here because the door partially self-erects. Unhook that from the top of the slot here. That's exceptionally reluctant to move. That's better. There we go. So the door's off. We're down to the body and the legs. Retaining rings in these are sometimes entertaining to get out because there's a very small gap between the retaining ring here and the outside face. There's a couple of pins that come through for the helical and they can foul it. See if I can get this tool engaged. I think that's it. Now the tool I'm using here is the Beljan tool, which you can't get. You may occasionally strike one second hand on eBay. I'm not getting any engagement at all there. Collapse the front of that camera down, see if I can have a closer look at that. If the notches in the ring are in a convenient place, somewhere in this area, you can get a tool onto it. If they're up here and down here, you're pretty much jiggered. Let's see. I'll try another tool.